we begin Sefer Shemos. Yes, the Ramban has an introduction. Jeremy knows. You have to see the Ramban's introduction to Sefer Shemos. You know the introduction? It's very important, very important. So Ramban says like this: Hishlem HaKos of Sefer Bereshis, right at the beginning of the introduction. The Torah finishes Sefer Bereshis with Sefer Yetzira b'Chodesh Ha'olam Yetziras Kol Notza. Sefer Bereshis is about the creation and the world and everything else. And everything that happens to the Avos, which is itself a form of creation. Every word of the Ramban is specific, right? It's a form of Yetzira Lazara. So we think of Sefer Bereshis as, the beginning is creation, and the rest is about the beginning of the history of Jewish people. No, says the Ramban, it's all Sefer Yetzira, because it's all about the creation. Everything is creation in Bereshis. You have the creation of the world, and you have the creation of humankind, and you have the creation of the Jewish people. And it's a Yetzira, it's all a Yetzira, it's all a creation. Because everything that happens to the Avos, we learn this a number of times in Sefer Bereshis, the Ramban mentions this on a number of occasions, the actions and the things that happen to the Avos play out in real time to them, because the actual things that happen to them, because they will then transpire for their descendants, for us. After it's completed the Yetzira, there's another Sefer which begins, which is the Maisa, the actions which come min haramozim hoheim, from those hints, those beginnings. It's directly connected in that way. And it's the actions which come from those hints, so to speak, which are laid down in Sefer Bereshis. V'nisiyached Sefer ve'ela Shemos be'inyan hagolos harishan hanigza b'feirosh u'begula mimenu. And the Sefer ve'ela Shemos is specifically, it's dedicated to the first Golos, the exile, which is first decreed in the Bris Bein HaBesorim, and the redemption from it. And therefore we begin with the names of those who went down to Mitzrayim and their numbers. Even though this is already written. We know this from Parshas Vayigash, who went down to Mitzrayim, and the details of all the Shvatim. Because the descent there is the beginning of exile, because that's when it began. And again, you see the Ramban, you see these themes all the way through the Ramban. If you remember that we learned on Parshas Vayigash, we learned the Ramban has a very strong focus on the beginning of the Golus and when that begins. And as we know, it's measured at different points in time. There are different ways you can measure it. Is it from the birth of Yitzchak, and how you count the number of years, and the 400 years, and the 420 years, and the 210, but the Ramban has a very specific focus. Not that it only begins from then, but he has a very specific focus on Yaakov's descent. There's a whole long Ramban there as to what happens then. And Hashem appears to him in a vision, and he calls him Yaakov specifically because he's going down into exile, and that's the name that's associated with exile. And it all begins then, and that is the beginning of the Golus. And Ramban repeats that here, and therefore we repeat here these words: Ve'ela Shmos b'nei Yisrael haboim Mitzrayma, right? Eis Yaakov Amano. That was the beginning of the Golus. It's not that we're just recapping what happened previously. But the exile, the Golus itself, starts with that episode, the descent to Mitzrayim. And the Rambam says something incredible here. He says that the Golus itself, the exile, is not completed until the day they return to their place and to that original level of their ancestors. Because Mitzrayim, when they left Egypt, so they left the house of slavery, but they're still in exile. They're wandering around in the desert. They're not in their homes. When they come to Har Sinai, but also Mishkan, and Hashem returns, and His presence rests on the Jewish people. Then they return to the Mailas Avosam, the level of their ancestors. So because it was the secret of Hashem on their tents. And this is the Merkava, the heavenly chariot, mystical ideas. And that's when they are considered to be redeemed. The Shechina resting on their tents as expressed through the Har Sinai and then the building of the Mishkan. that's when they're considered to be redeemed. And that's why the completion of this Sefer is when the Mishkan is completed and the glory of Hashem fills it, right? That is the Ramban's, that is the Ramban. The Ramban connects links the whole of Sefer Bereshis, Sefer Shemos, number 1 to Sefer Bereshis. It's the actuality and the realization, the beginning of the realization of what transpires to the Ovos. And also the idea that the whole Sefer is Golus and Geula, right? Is exile and redemption. And the second part of the Sefer, he's saying, don't think that that is detached from the first half, right? That you have the story of the Yetzias Mitzrayim and then a whole new piece about the Mishkan. No, it's all one part, because that's the Geula is only realized with the building of the Mishkan. And that's why it links beautifully to the very last posuk in Sefer Shemos. He doesn't quote here, but I think that's what he means. He's connecting to it, right? Ki anan Hashem ala Mishkan yomam ve'eshti elai lo bo le'enei chol beis Yisrael b'chol ma'aseihem. That's the last posuk in Pekudei, right? That it is the Shechina, it's the anan Hashem ala Mishkan that is itself the realization of the Geula, right? That's what the Ramban is saying. So this is what he says. Now, what is it on the first posuk? The Ramban says that what is the we'll just do the first paragraph. Why is it again? He talks about this idea of Eilesh Shmos. Why does he talk about the names? The Torah wants to tell us and to count and to enumerate the idea of Golus from the descent to Mitzrayim, because that's when they went into exile. As he just explained, that's the beginning of the Golus. And therefore it returns to the beginning of the topic, and goes back to the idea when Yaakov brings all his descendants with him to Mitzrayim. And there it says, if you look carefully in Parshas Vayigash, it says, "V'shom kosav acharav ve'ela shmos b'nei Yisrael haboim Mitzrayim." It's the same words as here. It's exactly the same words, right? These are the names of Bnei Yisrael who came to Mitzrayim. And therefore, this posuk is reiterated here. Even though there are two Sforim, right? The story connects with the things that come one after the other. When it mentions the children of Yaakov, it doesn't speak at length about his descendants. And it just repeats the klal, the general idea. It doesn't talk here about, I think it means all of the descendants, but it mentions the idea of the 70, the idea of the Shivim. So again, the Ramban is just emphasizing that the notion of Shemos, of the names, is to connect it specifically to that enumeration and that listing of the names that takes place and transpires in Parshas Vayigash, and it links directly to it. We are not just recapping. We are beginning here with the fundamental creation and the fundamental beginning of the story of the Golus and the Geula. There are those who point out Ramban doesn't seem to specifically emphasize this, although you could maybe bring it into what he's saying. Is that the remarkable thing about Sefer Shemos is that it is not called the Sefer HaGeula, it is called Sefer Shemos, and Shemos means names. And the point about people who are enslaved is the one thing, or the thing that they lose is their sense of self, their sense of identity, the fact that they have names. So you have this incredible idea that the Sefer, which was going to the whole story of the reduction of the Bnei Yisrael to a nation of Avodim, right? It begins with the reiteration that, no, these are people with names. These are Shmos. That's what they have to hold on to, right? Through the generations of slavery. So that's another idea, and the fact that there's a lot you can build out of that idea. Let's go a few psukim on to Pasuk Yud. Hova nischak moloi. What is the plan? What is the plan? So Ramban explains to us what Paro's plan was. What is the Hova nischak moloi? What is the cleverness here? What is the chokhmah that Paro is trying to do. What the Ramban does is something fascinating. He says that Paro has a problem with his own people. It's not just that he has a problem with the Jewish people. He has a problem with how to sell the plan to enslave and even kill. They want to kill all the boys and everything, but he wants to his own people. It's unpalatable for them. It's against all normal norms of human behavior. And therefore, he has to be nischakem, right? He has to be clever in the way he sells it to his own people. You'll see such incredible parallels with despotic regimes nowadays and how they operate, right? Look what he says. Paro and his advisors didn't see it correct to just kill them and massacre them with the sword. There would be a great rebellion to smite with for nothing. They were told to come, right? Grandpa Paro, whether you say Melech Chodesh, if you say Melech Chodesh, it's Grandpa Paro or Father Daddy Paro, but if it's not, it's the same king, Nischachu Gezerosov, the famous Ramban Shmuel, right? Is it a new king? Is it the original king? However you understand it, at the end of the day, they came because he invited them. They were invited in, right? Mitzvahs Melech Harishon. No, Jeremy, you invited in, yeah? They were told to come. So how is it that you can now go along? It's terrible. You're going to bring in a people, welcome them to your land, then you're going to massacre them. The Am Ha'oretz, the people of the land, are just not going to allow it. It's not going to fly. They're not going to allow the king to carry out this violent act of the destruction of this people.
Egyptian society is portrayed as being depraved, the worst place, the worst society.
Deprivation is not, or depraved. Deprivation, that's different. Depraved doesn't necessarily mean. Yeah, you can be a depraved society, and you can be involved in all sorts of depraved acts, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're involved in wanton murder. No, I mean there's two separate things. You know what I mean? You're right. There's a depraved society. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think maybe your question more is about the fact that it's a very hierarchical society. So it's power. Everything's power, right? Soloveitch talks about this in a famous piece on Parshas Bo about the firstborn, the cult of the firstborn. The whole idea of the firstborn and what plays out with the firstborn and the bechor, and what I've mentioned this before. The whole idea of bechor. Yeah, what is it? What's going on? Your firstborn son will die, makas bechoros. Then you have kol bechor, not kol bechor. That's in Devar. But you have the what's it called? Petek or rechem. The idea. Where's the firstborn? What is this idea of the firstborn? And Soloveitch says that the firstborn cult is what represents everything about ancient Egypt, because ancient Egypt is all about power, all about hierarchy, down to individual households. So the firstborn has the power, and therefore the firstborn subjugates everyone else, right? And you know what I mean? It's representative. The idea of the firstborn is representative of the entire system that the Torah is so antithetical to the Torah. And so there's this amazing idea out that Kaddish, right? Kaddish li kol bechor. Who is Kadosh? What bechor? Where do you have to do pidyon haben for? The bechor of who? Firstborn of the father or the mother? The mother. You understand? Which is an ancient Egyptian society could not understand that. Why is the kedusha attaching to the mother's firstborn? It's all about the father. It's all about the hierarchy of the father and his son and the patriarchals and that type of thing. And we go along and say no, there's a kedusha in the firstborn of the mother. It's much more to the piece, but it's a beautiful piece. Anyway, that doesn't help, Jeremy. I didn't answer your question.
You also made it even more hierarchical.
Yes.
By effectively enslaving the whole.
Well, that's an interesting question. So the Meforshim explained that Yosef's whole plan there was to set up a system that would help his descendants, right? Because the idea of the Komrim, the priests were exempt, so that would allow the Shevet Levi themselves, the Kohanim to be exempt from the system. There's a lot of this kind of what's going on. What Yosef puts in place is effectively perhaps the first taxation system. That's what he does, because there's it's a simple taxation system of a fifth to Paro and everything, and there's no different bands and groups and income based and everything else. It's just a straight. Well, it's a flat tax. That's what it is. Okay, it's all good anyway. So let's see what the Ramban says. He says they would never allow it. He used to take advice from them. Right, and also, of course, there are great people and numerous people, and therefore they're going to start a war, and there's going to be a war in his country. So that's another problem, right? How he can't start with them in this way because then they're going to fight back, and there's going to be terrible things going on. But I think it's a fascinating thing. You can have a completely despotic ruler. You can have someone who's a tyrannical, control. The archetype system of the which is of what's it called, the dictators and Paro in ancient Egypt. At the end of the day, you still need assent. You can't. It doesn't matter what. Go on.
The need to consult the people as well.
Yeah, it doesn't work. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how tyrannical you are, unless you have some way of bringing the people along with you. And that's why you find historically that even the most tyrannical of rulers have often been very charismatic. In often a depraved way, because they know, you understand, that's how they get to the positions of power, that together with the absolute power they have and want, they need to bring the people with them, because otherwise you can't, it won't work. And that's what Paro realizes here. So what is Hoban Ischak Monoyav? He said to do in a way of wisdom, Shelo Yargishu Yisrael. They shouldn't realize that he was acting with them in this way of hate, of ava animosity. And therefore, he imposes a tax, and the tax is that they start working for him. Yeah, Ori Miskanos Lefare, etc. They start serving, they start building things. Yeah. You see in Sefer Malachim, people who come as strangers in the land is reasonable. There's a tax to pay. That's something which is palatable. And then the next stage is quietly and secretly he tells the midwives to kill the boys with the birthing stool. And even he says interestingly that it seems that even though, I don't know what they mean, even perhaps the mothers giving birth wouldn't know about it, maybe, yeah? It's all done quietly. Maybe they would kill them secretly and they wouldn't know. It's interesting, right? Maybe the mothers wouldn't find out. They think maybe it was disguised as an accident. Who knows? Something it was a secret ploy. It was a secret ploy, right? Okay. And then he goes on to explain, we don't have to see the whole of the rest of it inside, but basically he says that's why the next stage is then to throwing into the river. He says basically that it wasn't that there was a group of exterminators who went around and massacred. No, he says kol habein hayilot haya'er tashlichu. What does that mean? Kol habein hayilot. Every one of you who finds a child, throw him in the river. Right? In other words, you get the masses to do their bit, basically. And if the father of the child comes to complain to the king, all he'll say is, who says this actually happened? Bring witnesses, and we'll of course we'll carry out judgment. How can it be that someone would carry this out? It's all a ploy. You see, nothing's changed. Do you understand? He gets the masses along with him, and to such an extent that it just they just carry these things out. And when someone finds out, or one of a father will complain, what happened to his son? So Paro will say, "Whoa, a terrible thing happened against the law. Against the law. We'll make sure that justice is served." And they say, "We'll bring witnesses." And of course, we won't have witnesses, etc., etc. So this is the whole plan. Yeah. And then he says they would go in, and they go into the houses. Yeah. All right. Okay. So let's see now. Let's move to another piece. Beis Posuk Aleph Batera Osoi Kitovu, and she sees him. That is Kitovu. She sees him Kitovu Batitzpanehu. She sees that he is good, and she hides him. And the Ramban has a basic question, which seems like it's Rashi's question as well. What do you mean? He says she saw that he was good, and therefore she hid him. Yodua. All women have their children. You don't need a reason. Why does the Torah need to give a reason for her hiding him? Which mother would not hide her child to save him? You understand? Because he's good, but it's Benea. What if he made a decision? Like she's looking at this baby, not sure, good or bad. Don't know if I should keep him. Of course not, right? Of course she's going to save him, right? So what do these words mean? Yofim v'sheinam yofim. They love all their children, whether they're beautiful or not, whether they're good or bad. They'd all titzpena, they all hide their children, however they're able to. You don't need this proof because he was good. What is this goodness? She saw something new, something new. There's an extra element of good here. And her calculation was that there was something special about this child. That a miracle would occur, and he would be saved, right? And he would be saved. And that's what it means. And that's why she went through the whole process and she worked out how to save him, because she had a sense, that there was something special about him and HaKadosh Baruch Hu would protect him. When she couldn't protect him anymore, then she thought of another plan. She puts him in the basket, and her sister waits there, right? And that's what he said. And this all supports what Chazal say. He says that the house was filled with light, right? And that Miriam prophesied that she would have that her mother would have a child who would save Klal Yisrael. That's what they mean. That's what it means. And that was what she sensed. Rashi says, that's what happened. The house was filled with light at the birth of the child. Although I always remember many years ago, Mashgiach in Gate said, Mordechai Yosef Shlita Karnowski, he says that I remember once we're going to him to advice many years ago, because I was involved in a situation where it was a very tragic situation. Someone lost a baby at a very young age, a few days after birth, and they wanted some some chit. It was many years before I became a Rav. I was really a bacher at the time, but there was I had a strong connection with the family, and there was one of the boys in the family, was sort of wrote a letter to me and wanted some chizuk and whatever, and it was very difficult. I didn't know anything about what to say, anything. I was really completely lost. And he quoted this Rashi to me, and he said, "That's something you can say, right? That the act of being in the world, just being present in the world, filled the house with light. You understand that if there's a presence, a being and an existence, it brings a light to the world that we can't fathom." That was it was, again, the word chizuk is not a word you can use in this phrase, but it was something. It was a medrash, it was a chazal, it was a meaningful, it was something meaningful. Let's move on to Perek Gimel. We only got a few more minutes, so just a brief idea. Gimel, hey, Perek Gimel, see, we've got time. We've got a few things, but we'll see what we've got time for. Perek Gimel, where is it? Perek Gimel, okay. Yeah. So in Perek Gimel Posuk Hey, he says that just briefly, Al Tikrav Haloim, when Moshe Rabbeinu is told, do not come close. So the Ramban has a kasha. Why is it that he's not allowed to come close? Why is that? Later on, Moshe Rabbeinu is going to go up Har Sinai. So what does it mean? Why does the Torah here say in the first instance, don't come close, right? Because this place is holy. And the Ramban says, you need to understand Moshe Rabbeinu hadn't got there yet. He hadn't yet reached that level of Nevuah. On Har Sinai, he will go up Har Sinai. He will approach Hashem himself. And that's why Moshe hides his face by Esther Moshe Panov, Pasuk Vov. He hides his face. Why? He was afraid. Later on, the Torah describes Moshe Rabbeinu that he's in some way able to see HaKadosh Baruch Hu. However we can understand those words. I think this is a very powerful Ramban. Very short, 3 lines. It's a journey. Moshe Rabbeinu is also going on a journey in his spiritual levels. Lahavdil, obviously it's on a level of a Moshe Rabbeinu. But I think we perceive and imagine and see, we think of the Moshe Rabbeinu who became the Moshe Rabbeinu, we think, well, that's how he is at the beginning. But even at the point where he's the Nevuah, and he's at the snare, and he's encountering this dialogue with HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. But he's not that level he will get to later. And the Torah brings that out in subtle ways. And then very finally, again, a brief idea, Perek Dala, Posuk Gimel, and apologies for the briefness, but we'll say we're bound by the time. So he says, Ramban says, what is going on? The last paragraph of Posuk Yud Gimel. There's 2 paragraphs in the Ramban on Posuk Yud Gimel. Why does the Moshe Rabbeinu say to Hashem, Vayomer bi Hashem shlach no biyad tishlach. Send with whoever you're going to send. And look at the second paragraph. Vanochen be'enai. Can you see that? Yeah, Posuk Gimel, Perek Daled Posuk Gimel. Vanochen be'enai. And it's correct in my eyes. He says, "Shlach no biyad kol asher tishlach." Send with whomever you want. He ein odom ba'olam shelo yiyah hogon yosem mimeni l'shlichus. There is no one in the world, right, that will not be better than me for this job. It's a remarkable thing. Shlach no biyad tishlach means anyone is better than me. Anyone. There's anyone. It doesn't matter who you're saying with. Just it's not me, because everyone's better than me. You want to understand why it takes 7 days. You want to understand the whole dialogue, backwards, forwards, this and that. Why is it that Moshe Rabbeinu will not accept the role he's been given? The reason is because Anvoso Hagedolah, his great humility, because his intense humility beyond anyone else in the world. He didn't find it within himself to raise himself up and to speak to the king, to be able to say, Hashem, send me. And not to send Yisrael out of Mitzrayim, not to be a king over them, because he is literally, as the Torah says in Parshas Beha'aloscha, he is on of Moed Mikol Ha'odam, and he sees that, and you see that brought out here. Shlach no biyad tishlach. I genuinely believe, he says, that everyone else is better than me. That I do not have you can say anyone, and it'll be better than my ability to do this. It's a fascinating thing because how you understand what the concept of humility is, and it's a complicated area. We generally understand humility is not denying your own abilities and what you are able to do, right?
It's hard to place that next to Hashem's anger.
Why Hashem doesn't? Yeah. I mean, what is Hashem teaching him, perhaps, about roles and responsibilities and what he's able to do? Maybe that's a part of it. Maybe that is indeed the response. That your humility, as in you're saying almost that humility is not I'm worthless and not everyone is better than me. No, you have a role to play which you have to play. But it's also interesting because you see elsewhere in the Torah, where you see sometimes the Nevi'im, and I'm trying to remember which of the Nevi'im. I think it's Yeshayahu, no? When HaKadosh Baruch Hu appears to him in a Nevuah, was it Yirmiyahu? Hineni Shalcheni. So do you know what I mean? But there's a Nevuah, and he says, "Here I am, send me." I'm ready to fulfill the mission. So it's a different approach.
Yeah.
No, well, Yonah runs away. I mean, the second time. But I'm not. I have in my mind that it's the beginning of. Can't remember offhand. Anyway, something to look up. Anyway, just again, these are just very brief lines in the Ramban, but it just opens perhaps a little bit into what we've been learning the whole way through. The world that's within these psukim and within the Ramban's approach. So, as I said, Be'ez Hashem next week will be only online, but the plan is to continue the share. Will be in Be'ez Hashem in Yerushalayim, so we'll have the share at the same time here. Mitzvah Hashem on the regular Zoom link. For now, have a very, very good Shabbos. Okay. Thank you for joining.